Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for attending on behalf of ProTech Training. My name is Philip Anderson. I'm going to introduce the speaker before we get started. He has been working in process change and has been a project manager, a BA, and a project portfolio manager for the past 30 years. He was one of the first 50,000 people to have his PMP, which he achieved in 2002. He achieved a CBAP in 2016, and here at ProTech, we've worked with him for quite a few years. So thank you for attending again, and with no further ado, let me introduce and pass it over to Gary.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. Glad you could join us today for this webinar. We're going to today go into a little piece of one of our courses, the Business Process Analysis class. This is a topic that is of some concern to many organizations. Business process, of course, is how we get our work done. And we live and breathe by these processes. So today we're going to take a look at what we do as BAs, as business analysts, to think about business process, to wrestle with them when perhaps they're having difficulty. And I'm actually going to introduce a technique that we use in order to work with business process when we're engaged in an analysis and possibly thinking about doing some kind of an improvement. So again, our general topic is business process analysis. Specifically, we're going to be looking at process goals and metrics. This is a central piece of what we do in this work. So today's agenda, we're going to briefly look at what business process is. I'll introduce the concept of business process analysis, and I will show you the business process analysis life cycle. This is the work that we actually engage in to go from the point of identifying a process that we want to work with all the way through to the point where we are recommending actions that management can take in order to improve the process, for example. And then we're going to zero in on one of the steps of that life cycle, and that's process goals and metrics. I'll describe what process goals are and what metrics are and how we determine them. And I'll do this through introduction of a technique called goal question metric, or GQM. I've got Q&A indicated at the end here. I'll actually leave room for Q&A also as we go through the talk. First thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about what a process is and what business process analysis is, and then I'll introduce you to the BPA lifecycle. So a process is defined as a specified series of actions that we take in order to get something done. I mean, in the basic sense, that's what it is. And we have tons of business processes that we live with every day. The process that gets you your paycheck, the process that allows you to buy something, the process that allows you to request travel. There are all kinds of processes that we work with day in and day out. Some of them are mundane and some of them are challenging and some of them are actually critical to the business. So as an example, if you're a business that sells stuff online, you need to be able to put new products into your product catalog. And there's usually a fairly intricate process behind the scenes involving the work of many departments coordinating together to make that happen. So some processes are simple and some are very complex. The critical features of any business process is that they have a specific non-random sequence. So we're going to do the steps of the process in a particular order. The process steps are performed largely by people, although systems can be engaged here as well. There are places where automated systems can come in and do some of the work. And finally, there's a reason for taking the actions. Not only that we get a result, but also in that every business process should create a value. And this is a rather critical thing because we have processes that we engage in, unfortunately, sometimes that don't actually produce much value, and we may not be aware of it. So one of the goals of process analysis is to help us understand not only which processes are working well and which are not, but also which processes perhaps are not as necessary as others, and we may be able to combine or even eliminate process. So every process should create value. And here's the problem. Sometimes processes break, And when processes break, that value that we're looking for, this gold chest in the lower right corner, can become elusive or absent. So if the steps of the process are not working well, or if the people who are working on the process are not able to do their work in as good a fashion as we'd expect, we may not get the results of the process that we need. The process outputs may not occur at all, or they may be of low quality. We may not get that value. And so process change is about making certain that we get the value that we need at a cost that makes sense. So processes have certain quality characteristics. When we engage in process change, we're looking for ways to make processes work more effectively and ensure that they produce the value that they're supposed to. In order for processes to do this, we need to have a known process goal so that everyone knows where they're going. We want the process to be repeatable, which means we can do it again and again in the same way and expect the same output. We want it to be predictable. The process should be flexible, which means if we run into a roadblock, we're able to actually make a slight change that will make the process go forward. So we don't want it to be rigid, although we want it to be regular. And we want every process to be usable, which means mere humans can do the work without the need for superpowers. Our process output should be of sufficiently high quality to create the value that we want from the process. Process outputs should occur in a timely manner. We should be able to get those outputs with minimal time, resources, and cost put in. And the process should be effective, which means it gets the job done every time. Finally, the process should be verifiable, which means it should be possible to validate that we have the outcome and that we have the outcome that we need. So when we engage in process analysis work, when we try to improve processes, these are the quality characteristics that we try to build into any new process or to build up in existing process. So if we want to improve a process, if we want to get those quality characteristics where they need to be, these are the areas where we can have impact. We can work on the process steps, make certain that they are well defined, that they're adequately documented. We want to know that the people working on the process understand what the steps are and are able to follow them. We want to know that the requirements of the process are clear so we can know that we're meeting them. We want to include validation points in the process, checkpoints along the way to make certain that the process is actually working in the way that it needs to work. And we want to know enough about the process and be able to measure the effectiveness of the process well enough so that we can continuously improve it. So that as we use it, week by week, month by month, we can find ways to tweak it to make it more efficient, more effective, more reliable. So I can work on the process steps themselves. Another way I can improve a process is through tools. If I have a fully manual process, I can automate it. I can bring tools in. If I'm currently using tools, perhaps the tools have been used for a long time and they're no longer as effective as they might be, I might improve the tool. It may be that I'll calibrate the tool in some way to make it more effective. But in all cases, I want to make certain that the tools that I have are appropriate to the tasks at hand. The third thing I can work with when I'm trying to improve process are the inputs. The inputs are the information that comes in, the raw materials that come in. Whatever it is that I have as inputs, I'm going to act on those inputs through the process steps using my tools in order to create the outputs. I want to make certain, therefore, that when I get my inputs, I'm getting them in a timely manner. I'm getting what I need when I need it, that the inputs have the appropriate quality, that I'm getting the right quantity and the correct type, it's packaged appropriately, and you can think of a lot of other characteristics for inputs that you would want to be right. So if I'm trying to improve a process, I can check these things and make certain that our inputs, in fact, are what we actually need. The fourth thing that I can work with when I'm trying to improve process is the people. Now, oddly enough, when we are trying to improve process, or if we have a process problem and we are trying to figure out what's wrong with it, folks will often jump to the conclusion that, oh, well, the people must be at fault here. And that's actually mostly not true. If a process has a failure, usually it has something other as its cause. What we want to know is that we have the right people on the job, that they have the right experience, the right training, the right aptitude, the right motivation, that we have the right people doing the work, that they're available when we need them. And we want to know that they know how to work with the inputs. We want to know that they have access to the tools and that they have proper experience to make good use of those tools and that they're getting the right tools. We want to know that those people understand the process, know the steps of the process, know their role in the process. So these are all the things that we can work with when we're trying to improve process, make it better, in order, again, to bring the process to the point where it has those quality characteristics that I covered in the previous slide. So business process analysis is where we actually measure a process that is underway by looking at the goals that the process is working for. We look at the effectiveness and efficiency of the process. Is it doing the work appropriately? And we also can model the process. We can use graphical and tabular and other kinds of models to help us understand the process, ensure that everyone is working in the way that they're supposed to, and possibly find ways to make improvement. So business process analysis is formally part of enterprise analysis, which is a bigger topic, and we're not going to get into that here. But it is an important aspect of the work that business analysts do in the organization to ensure that the organization is working in an effective way. And we can use business process analysis in a number of different ways, not just to improve processes, but for other reasons as well. So there's lots of reasons we engage in process analysis. You know, obviously we can fix a process. If a process is broken, if things are not working, we can use business process analysis, wade in, discover the root cause of the problem, and include a fix. We can sometimes discover that we need to retire a process. We no longer to do this line of work. And we would use business process analysis to help us do that in a rational way. We use process analysis to automate a process, and sometimes to just standardize it. Sometimes we just want to write standard operating procedures. If we want to make certain that everyone's using it in the same way, if we want to conduct training in the organization and make certain that everyone is trained appropriately on the correct version of the process, we may use process analysis simply to standardize the process, come up with a formal description, and then work with it from there. And then we can apply that to our training. We also use process analysis anytime we do a software upgrade or we introduce new software. You pretty much can't touch the software without in some way affecting the process. So when you have a software project where you want to bring in, for example, a commercial off-the-shelf package in order to do work in a different way, you also have a process change project on your hands, whether you realize that or not. And finally, we use process analysis when we want to generate a new process. We want to do something new in the organization. Now, this is a curious thing as well. When we do process analysis today on process that already exists, often we can't go to a place and find a complete write-up on the process that we're currently using. And part of the reason for that is many processes that we use evolved over time. It wasn't as though somebody sat down and deliberately created it. Somebody needed to get some work done, and so they did. And they did it repeatedly in the same way, and then that became the process. And over time, it can morph, it can change, and that's where we need to go in sometimes and just discover, well, how exactly are we doing this today? But now that we understand that we have this tool of business process analysis, when we want to do something new, we can be intentional about designing that new process so that it does have the right people, it does have the right inputs, it is using the appropriate tools, and so on. So we can use business process analysis to create a new process. The one thing to understand with business process analysis when we're trying to fix something, fix a process, is that the business process analysis itself is its own project. The purpose of business process analysis when we are trying to fix a process is to discover what the problem is, come up with a fix, and make recommendations to management. At that point, the business process analysis work is done. That's this thing on the left, the BPA. The recommendations are handed off to management, and if management agrees that they want to do this, a second follow-on project is created, the implementation project, where we actually put the improvements in place. So process analysis is a project unto itself, and it needs to be defined as such, have its own team, its own time frame, and so on. Its goal is to come up with recommendations for improvements. Those improvements are carried out in a follow-on project. There are many roles in process analysis. The business analyst obviously has a role here, and the process owner. But you can create a process action team. These are the people who work with the BA to do the work of process analysis. There are subject matter experts who may be referred to who are knowledgeable about the process, and other stakeholders, people who use the process on a regular basis. There usually is a sponsor of the analysis, someone who asked that the business process analysis be done. And there are executives who may have a stake in this because the analysis may be central to the way the business works. And so they may have a stake in how this analysis works out. One thing that's about the business analyst in this work is that the BA has to work as a detective, and more so than in other aspects of business analysis. So when a BA is brought into a situation where a process is said to be broken, there generally at that point is a lot of guesswork about what's going on. There's speculation about why the process isn't working, about what must be done in order to fix it. Sometimes the business analyst is brought in and told, this process is broken, you need to do this to fix it. And BAs need to be wary of that, because oftentimes when we're told the process is broken and it needs to be fixed in this way, that is based on supposition. It's based on guesswork by folks who are anxious to get the process fixed. And based on their experience, it seems as though this is most likely what's going on. But we've had enough occasions in past history where people have said this, and we've gone ahead and tried to fix the process in the way we were directed, only to discover that that wasn't really the problem. Now we have to go back and do it again, find out what the real root cause of the trouble was, and fix that. The BAs understand now that when they come into a situation where a process is said to be broken, the first thing we do is determine, is the process really broken in the way that people think? So is it broken? When did that start? Where is this happening? Is it broken everywhere? Who's affected by it? Is it broken all of the time? There's a long list of questions that we ask to characterize the process, to try to understand the true nature of the problem before we will wade in and actually do more work. In fact, we will collect data to determine objectively exactly what the problem is. Because again, when we're brought in and told the process is broken and this is what's going on, folks may not really understand everything that's happening. And often in business process, the thing that's broken is buried somewhere, and we have to really dig in order to find it. So business analysts in this situation need to work as a detective. They need to question everything. They need to verify everything. It's not that they don't trust people. It's just that we've had enough experience to know that we need to determine this on our own to find out what the true story is, so we can move the organization effectively in the right direction right off the bat. This helps management to make fact-based decisions rather than other kinds of decisions, so that we're moving in the right direction right away. Business process analysis is not always worth doing. Now that may sound strange, but in fact, when we have a broken process, one of the things that the BA asks is this worth fixing? And there's a CCC test that we apply. So we ask, is the broken process, in fact, costing the organization money? And if so, is it costing enough money to make it worthwhile to fix it? If it's only costing us a couple $100 a year in a multi-million-dollar company, that may not be worth the fix. The second question is the process as a broken process preventing us from remaining in compliance? If that's true, generally we need to fix the process, or we could be falling outside of the law. The third question we ask is the broken process affecting the customer? If it's not affecting the customer, that means it's not really causing us to lose money. So if the process is not really costing us money, it's not a compliance issue, and it's not preventing us from making money or fulfilling our mission in the world, if we're a not-for-profit organization, we may be looking at a process failure that is an inconvenience rather than something that's an urgent difficulty that we need to jump on right away. So another thing that we do as BAs is we prioritize our work and make certain that we're working on the processes that are really urgent for the organization, that are really important for the organization, to know that we're putting our efforts in the place where we'll get the most benefit. So there's value here. Folks, business process analysis is really important work. When things break, when our organization is no longer working or some aspect is no longer working the way it needs to, this is how we find out what's going on. This is how we actually can get in there and fix it. So the value of this is that we keep vital business processes working. We can focus our efforts in the place where it really needs to go, and management gets the information they need so that they can decide if they want to actually put the time and effort into fixing a process and what is the best way for them to go about it. So this work is central. We engage in it a lot. And there's a formal approach to this that works really, really well. And that's what I want to show you in this little webinar. This is the life cycle of business process analysis. These are the steps that we engage in. Doing a quick run through this, we need to choose the process we want to work on. We need to choose the people in the organization who will work on it. So if we have a business analyst, they're assigned. The BA will do stakeholder identification and find those people who really need to be working on this particular process. We will then plan that analysis and begin the work. Part of planning the analysis will create a process action team charter. This spells out who's working on this job internally, what work are we going to do, how long do we think it will take. Business process analysis often requires that people from operations areas be involved in the work. We want to be very respectful of their time. We don't want to take more of their time than we have to. So when we create this process action team charter, we try to figure out up front how long is this likely to take so they know how much time they'll be away from their regular work and for how long that will go on. We will then elicit information about the process, and there are a number of different methods for doing this: interviews, workshops, observation. We gather the information we need so that we can understand what the process is, how it works, and begin to understand what's going on in it. Key to this is to document the goals of the process. Is by knowing the goals of the process that we can actually determine if the process is working or not. If it's currently meeting its goals, then that's great, but we also have to know, is it doing that efficiently? So we identify metrics, which are measurements we can take, that help us determine that. Is the process meeting its goals? Is the process doing that efficiently? Is it using a reasonable amount of time and resources? Once we have that information, we model the as-is process using a variety of different graphical and other models, such as swim lane diagrams, flow charts, use case models, and a variety of others that BAs are trained to use. We use the modeling in order to ensure that everyone agrees on how the current process works. With that model in mind, we now can look for root cause of difficulties that we have found. It's only when we find the root causes of problems that we can begin thinking about improvement options, because we won't want to make certain that we're fixing root cause issues. We will then take those improvement options, bring those to the stakeholders, validate that we're on the right track. If we're not, we'll get more information make certain that we've got the goals right, update our models, review our root cause analysis. And this is an iterative process. We'll go through this loop as many times as we need to until everyone agrees that we understand the as-is process, we understand what's going on, we've got the root cause, we have improvement options that make sense, and at that point, once we've got full validation from our stakeholders, we'll model a 2B process, so now we can see where we're going, and we will present recommendations to management. Hey, management, this is what we found out about the process. This is where we believe it's broken based on these data. These are the improvement options that we think will fix it most effectively and in the most timely manner. And what do you think? And sometimes we'll give them multiple options with a recommendation. At that point, management has the information they need so they can make an informed decision. They may choose to not fix the process. They may choose to pick the recommended option. They may choose an option other than that. But in any case, if action will be taken, that action will occur in a follow-on project. That would be step number 12, except it's not part of this. That follow-on project is where we actually fix things. So this is the process that we use to get through business process analysis. What I want to do in the time remaining is to focus specifically on number 5 here, document the goals, identify metrics, because this is an easy piece to understand, and it's central, and it's a place where the BA often needs help from the organization. So I thought this might be a good thing to bring in. What I'd like you to do is to think of a business process in your organization that you are familiar with, whatever it might be. If it's one that you're having difficulty with, all the better. But just think of that. If you have access to something like Notepad on your computer, type it in there. You know, what is the name of your process and what does it do? So for example, if you're thinking of the process you use to request travel, it would be the travel request process. And from the standpoint of the organization, it ensures that management understands when people need to travel and what the likely costs are, and they can decide in advance what travel makes sense and what doesn't, so that they're optimizing the value of the travel that is done. That would be an example. So take a moment, think of a process that you know about in your organization, write down the name and what is the purpose. You can do it on paper, you can do it in Notepad, it doesn't matter. When you have that done, if you put it in Notepad, you can copy what you've typed and paste it into the question area. If you're using pad and pencil, just hang on to it. And Phil, let me know if you see anything pop up in the question area, okay?
Will do.
All right. In the meantime, I'm going to go on, and Phil, I'll check with you in a couple minutes to see if we have anything out there. All right. Let's document goals and identify metrics. Purpose of this section is to get a quick introduction to this little piece of work that we do. It's actually central to the work of process analysis. It's definition of goals and identification of metrics, so that we're actually able to determine how effective a process is and does it actually need repair or replacement. We start with a formal problem statement. Now, this is important. When we're told that a process is not working, one of the hallmarks of this is that every process has multiple stakeholders, all right, different people involved with the process in different ways. And when a process breaks, different stakeholders will see that in different ways. I mean, literally, some people will see this aspect of the process broken. Other people will see another aspect of the process that's broken. Some people will only see the output is no longer occurring. I mean, so it's important that we speak with multiple stakeholders and understand all the ways in which this process is not working. What we will do then is we will write a single problem statement that tries to capture all this. And it's written in this formal way. The problem of X, and we'll describe the problem, has an effect on, and we'll describe what's affected, and that results in, and that describes the impact on the organization. So as an example, the problem of late delivery to customers, that's the first step, affects our business relationship with them. That's the second piece. And results in loss of follow-on business. That's the impact of the problem. So we try to come up with a problem statement like this that all of our stakeholders can agree with. And then we have a list of stakeholders who are affected and how each of them is affected. And that's important because when we're trying to fix this process, we want to make certain that we understand all the ways in which it's broken so that we fix every aspect of it. So our problem statement includes all of this. This is where we start. Once we have that, there are a whole lot of follow-on questions we want to ask. The ones in blue are specifically relevant to the section we're discussing right now, goals and metrics. Why is the process done? What are its goals? Why is it done the way it is? Is the current process sufficient to meet the business need? Is the current process operating efficiently? So these questions are going to drive a lot of what we do in our work with goals and metrics. But there are a lot of other questions we ask in process analysis. What constraints exist on this process? What are the steps? Who's involved? What are the inputs? Where do they come from? What are the outputs? Where do they go? What triggers the process to begin? How do you know when it's finished? Is the process being followed? By the way, is it documented anywhere? Can I go someplace and find a nice, handy documentation of this process, or do I have to do it all myself? So these are the kinds of questions we're asking in process analysis. The ones at the top are the ones that are relevant right now for our topic today. The purpose of identifying goals and then identifying metrics, again, is because at the start of a business process analysis, we have to determine exactly what the problem is and the extent to which it's a problem. And the way we do this, again, is we identify the business process goals, and then we identify metrics, which are measurements that we can take to determine if the goals are being met. Those metrics also tell us if the process is operating efficiently. And also, are there other problems to consider? So the two big questions here are, is the process as it's currently used sufficient to meet its goals? And is the process as currently used operating efficiently as it meets its goals? So it's possible that your process is not working effectively because you've changed your goals and your existing process is no longer designed to meet those goals. I mean, that's a possibility. And that can happen because the world changes. Your operations change, your markets change, regulations change. So you may be adjusting your process to meet these outside demands, but you may not be adjusting the process in a way that's effective. And one way we see this is that over time, if we have a process which has been around for a long time and it's no longer working well for us, we may start developing spreadsheets to track information because that's the only way they can do it. So one hallmark of a broken process is we have spreadsheets multiplying in the dark of night. It gets a little crazy. And so as a BA, I'll come in, if I see that, I'll say, oh, okay, that's a clue. We have a problem. So during the process analysis, once I have the goals, I can use the metrics to help me determine the root cause of failure in the process, determine if the to-be process is in fact sufficient or would be sufficient and efficient if I were to make a change to a future process. In fact, I can even use this to calculate a return on investment. If I change the process to something different, will it be worthwhile? Will the increased value that I get more than compensate for the cost of making the process change? So first I need process goals. Now here's some examples of process goals. First, there are tactical goals. These are the tactical results of the process, that I'm delivering the items I'm supposed to get, that they're delivered in a timely manner, that they're going to the correct party. These are the process outputs. These are tactical. And these are the things that everyone understands. Usually everyone understands that a process is supposed to do. But there's another level. We should be able to measure the business impact of a process. Every business process should create value. So what value am I getting from that process? To what extent is the process giving me something that makes it worthwhile? It's not enough that I get a report who's using the report and what difference does it make that they have it. This is for real, folks. There are organizations that spend a great deal of effort generating reports every month that are carefully distributed to a large number of people who carefully file that report away in a file drawer, and no one ever reads it. In fact, that organization may spend money and effort improving that process and making it even more effective, and no one ever uses the output. See, that's the problem. So I want to know, not only is the process doing the work it's supposed to do, is it actually having value in the organization? So I have tactical goals and I have business goals. I have tactical value and business value. In our work, we want to understand the goals at both levels. In improvement projects, process goals can be used as success criteria in the follow-on implementation projects. So in those cases, it's particularly important that we get these. And in fact, this is an important point. Again, if you're going to keep a process as is, if you have a problem with the current process and all you want to do is fix it and not change it in any way, then you're going to use today's process goals because they're adequate for you. But if you want to make a process different, you need to find new goals. You're going to have goals for the to-be process, and those are the goals that you will use to drive your process analysis. So that's a decision we have to make early on. Are we changing the goals, or are we using today's goals? So for the process you chose a few minutes ago, do you know what the tactical goals are? What are the outputs? If the process works appropriately, what comes out at the end? And do you know what the business goals are? Do you know why the CEO would care about that process? That would be the business goal. It's important for goals that we understand them at both levels. If we don't understand them at both levels, we could end up spending a lot of time and effort working on a process, making it better, and really, for what reason? And this happens. Formal business process analysis helps us to go through this work in a way that we don't waste time and we don't waste effort. Now, the curious thing about these goals, when we're doing business process analysis work, we can speak with the people who do the process every day to find out what the tactical goals are. But the business goals can be very difficult to chase down. In fact, we often find that no one really knows what they are. If they did, we would have stopped generating that report that no one reads. And the reason that can be true is that the process owner who was originally responsible for developing that process may be long gone. And we may have the fifth or sixth process owner, and all everyone knows is they have to do this process every week or every day or every month as part of what they do, as part of ongoing operations. They're evaluated at the end of the year on how well they do that process, but no one really knows at a business level why it's being done, what the value is. So sometimes we have to reverse engineer the business goals. There may not be anyone who can tell us. A curious thing about the work. So the technique I'm going to use here to really drive in is I'm going to use what's called goal question metric. I have my goals defined at this point. Now I figure out what metrics can I use to measure is the process working effectively. I'm going to use this technique to come up with those metrics. And this actually works very easily. I need to know what my goal is. That's step number one. So let's suppose that I'll pull one out of the air. We'll look at our travel request process, all right? So we know we have a travel request process. We know that when the process is done, the inputs are a request for travel. There are checks along the way. There's validation points. Is the request filled out appropriately and all that? I'll have to get approval on that request. So I'll have a supervisor sign it. And if it's going to cost a lot, maybe it needs to go to a manager. And at some point, there's going to be an approval released, which tells the person who requested the travel, you're approved to actually do this travel, and you have this much budget for this and this much budget for that. And so the output is an approval with specific information that gives advice to the traveler. These are the things you can do. All right, so that's...
Hey, Gary.
Yes, what do you got?
Okay, and I quote, name of process, submitting PTO requests when taking time off. Purpose of process, to track PTO days used and days remaining, to allow others to know when you are taking time off. And then the question is this what you wanted in reference to the earlier question for the exercise?
Yes, that is what I was looking for. So those are what you described were the tactical outputs. What is the business value in that? Why does the organization bother to do that? That would be a follow-on question. So if the person who submitted that would now answer that question, Phil, let me know when they do. And that would give us both tactical and business goals. And now let's use that as the target for our exercise here. So I have my business goal. We'll take PTO, I'm requesting paid time off. I have to submit a form. Someone's going to check out the form. They're going to check it against whatever it is they check against to validate that the request is valid. I have enough time that I can take off and all of that. And ultimately, I'll get a response, which is either, yes, you can take the time off, or no, you can't. If I can take the time off, I may be given some other information about that. So that's a fairly straightforward, simple process. It has simple inputs. It has simple outputs. Now, if I want to know, is this process actually working, I'm going to have to do some measurement. So what I'll do to figure out what to measure is I'm going to compose questions that, when those questions are answered, will reveal if the goals are being met. And then the metrics will actually be found within the question. So let's think about this. All right, we got a paid time off process. People have to fill out a form online or however so that they can get their paid time off. There may be rules associated with this. I have to have a certain amount of advance notice or whatever. So it goes in, and the process is people are checking against the request to ensure that all the ducks are in a row to allow this. The output is, yes, you can, no, you can't, and if not, this is why. Or yes, you can, but within these limits, or what have you. So how do I know that this is working? Well, I could ask the question, are people taking time off without putting through a request? I could ask the question, when people put the request in, do they always get a response? I could ask the question, when people put the request in, does the response they get actually match the criteria for yes or no? So, for example, thinking about that, all right, when they put the request in, do they get a no when, in fact, they do have time available? Do they get a yes when they don't have time available? So do you see how these questions are probing, is this process actually working? Well, let's think about the first question. My first question is, are people taking time off without putting in a request? What metrics do I need to answer that question? What data? Metrics are data. What data do I need in order to answer that question? Would somebody please put an answer into the question line? Again, the process is, I want to take paid time off. I believe I have the time, but I don't want to bother to go through the process. So I'm just going to take the days off. All right? Is that happening? What data do I need to find out if that's happening?
We do have an answer. Whether a person is clocking into work.
Okay, are people clocking into work? Yeah. If they're not clocking into work, and they're supposed to be in work because they don't have a paid time off approval, that's data that tells me that people are, in fact, not using the process. So that's an example. Raw data, folks. We're talking about data here. So as I say, don't overthink this. The first
another response.
Okay.
Request submitted versus work attendance.
Okay. So we put the requests in, and they got an approval. They got an approval to take time off, but they kept clocking in, so they didn't use the time. That's a problem. They got a paid time off approval, and they didn't clock in, so they're taking the time. They got an approval, and when they came back to work, they clocked in that they took the paid time off. I mean, that's raw data. That's what we're looking for here. So this is simple. This is not a complex process. The second,
Another response. Look at how many times does a person log into the leave system to see how much PTO they have. Are they looking at how much time they have?
Yeah, beautiful. All right, that's great. Because if people are going to actually request paid time off, they need to know how much time they've got. If no one ever checks that, they're just blindly putting, a request in, that's a problem. Now, there should be something about the process which would be a check. Another question, can people request paid time off that they don't have and the system gives it to them anyway? All right, so see, these are all questions I'm asking. Is the process working the way it's supposed to work? And then I can go out and get actual data to tell me, is it working? So if a manager tells me the process is broken, people are taking time off that they're not supposed to take, that by itself, that question by itself doesn't really characterize the problem well enough for me to know what's going on. I'm going to use the raw data to actually answer the question. So as a BA, I need to characterize the process, I need to determine the goals of the process, and then I'm going to figure out questions that, when answered, and data that allow me to answer the questions that help me to characterize, is this process working? And it's on that basis that I'll make judgments and be able to go back to management and say, you were right, this process is not working properly, these are the ways it's broken. Or, oh wow, I've got questions, Phil, thank you. Or I'll go back to management and say, all right, you said this isn't working and I've checked it out and I can't see any place where it's broken. Tell me again what's going on. So it helps me to drill down and get particulars and get details. And that's what this is really about. This is an example of a GQM template. This is where I would write down the goals, the tactical goals and the business goals of the process. For each goal, I would write down the questions that I want to ask that will help me to determine if the goals are being met. For each question, I will write down the metrics that I will measure in order to answer the question. And so I'll work this out with my stakeholders. I'll go out, I'll collect all the data, I'll answer the questions, and then I'll come back to the stakeholders and we'll have a discussion. Is the process actually meeting the goals or not? And if not, how? So we evaluate process with metrics data. This is a key part of process analysis. It keeps us fact-based. It makes certain that the work we put into process analysis is worth the time and effort and money. So at this point, if you wrote down a process, and we're running out of time, so we're not going to dwell on this, but if you wrote down a process and you had actually wrote down some questions, you could ask yourself, what data do I need to answer the question? Those are your metrics. And the tool is that simple. So goal question metric is a very simple tool. It's widely used throughout business analysis. And this process can also be used to select metrics in any other area. So in project management, if you want to know how to report on the health of a project, talk to management, find out what questions they want answered about the health of the project, then figure out what data you need to answer those questions. That's the metrics data you need to collect on your project. So it's GQM is a generally useful tool. So source of metrics data, the data may already exist. And in our example with PTO, those data probably all exist in your system. It's possible the data exists, but I have to do some calculations. And actually with the PTO example, yeah, I might have to calculate some things. I might have to collect data on my own. So sometimes in a business process analysis, the first thing I do is start collecting data so I can determine what's going on with the process. And that may take a little while, but it gives us information that we need. So that finishes our discussion of goals, questions, metrics. These other steps now would be taken in sequence. We might go through this loop a few times, but ultimately we would get to the point at the end where we could report to management that either the process is working and we don't need to do anything, or these are the problems, these are the ways we could fix it, this is what we recommend. What would you like to do? And that, in a nutshell, is business process analysis. These are classes that are coming up from ProTech, and the two that have asterisks next to them are specifically relevant to the topic we've covered today. Business analysis concepts, tools, and techniques is actually coming up in a couple of weeks, and starts on October 23rd. That's a 4-day class, and we spend one full day looking at business process analysis. We also have the business process analysis class coming up on December 17th, and that is a 3-day class, and it looks exclusively at what we just discussed, the whole realm of business process analysis. Both of these courses are very hands-on. Folks who take the classes spend a great deal of their time in exercises where they actually make use of the tools and techniques, so they have that in their hands when they go back to work.
All right.
So,
thank you very much, Gary. That was wonderful. Very much appreciated.
I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. I really appreciate that you took the time, and I look forward to seeing you sometime in the future. Phil, thanks for the opportunity to do this.
Thank you, Gary.